Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good to have you here with us this evening. And we're going to talk about these heroes of long ago, Jacob and Esau. And we're following what has happened from the time when God has told Adam and Eve what he is going to do about the sins of man, and he's followed them through to where he even changed the world so that man cannot live such a long, evil life. And he has brought a covenant to Abraham and said, from you, I'm going to build a nation. I'm going to give you great land, and I'm going to bring the Savior. So the record here in the Bible is not just about the world and how the world lived, but rather how specific events happened that where God brought about the Christ and his delivery of his people. So many of the things we see in these heroes of long ago are depicting things we're going to be able to see in Christ and know about Christ and recognize once we see him. So let's story here of Jacob and Esau. Now Jacob got the blessing from his father Isaac, and Isaac, was very sorrowful, and he wanted to bless Esau. He loved Esau more than he did Jacob, and Rebekah loved Jacob more than he did Esau. Now here's the thing: you're gonna see these attitudes of the parents being passed down into the children. And that's important because when you see that, you can say to yourself, okay, I see what's going on. I can either do the same thing or I can stop that bad behavior now when I raise my kids. Kind of interesting. There was a guy I knew over in Delaware, good guy, hardworking guy. He may have been in Maryland. I don't know. There's a line there. And he was born to a woman who didn't love him, didn't care about him, and in fact, really hated him. He never knew who his father was. And he said to me, why is it that God would allow me to be born into such a position as that? And I asked him, I said, are you married? He said, yes. Do you have children? Yes. And you're faithful in church? Yes. You go into, I knew who he was there, Church of Christ. And I said, you go and do what you're supposed to do. You love your wife? Yes. You love your children? Oh, yes. I would never treat them that way. I said, what you have done is you have stopped that behavior and you have brought that style of thinking to a halt and are now giving to your children what is right so that they too will be right people. And this is what we have to do. No matter the conditions of the position we're put in. So here Jacob is. He's sitting there. He's been blessed, and he knows that Esau hates him. Now, he probably thinks he hates him, yeah, and he's tricked him, and he's going to be able to get that over on him, but so what? However, his mother hears that Jacob's saying, I'm going to give him a certain time period, and then I'm going to go kill him. So he's going to get that blessing, that lineage from Jacob somehow. Well, the mother hears this. She warns Jacob, Jacob, you're going to have to get out of here. And here's what I want you to do. You just wait a minute. I'm going to go talk to your father. Now, if you ever saw the movie, The Big Fat Greek Wedding, in the movie, the girl wanted to go to college and work and do something else other than to work in the family restaurant. And that's what her father wanted. And she was crying, and her mother said, what's wrong? And she tells her, she says, and my father will never let me do anything else but work in that restaurant. And she said this. It's a very interesting statement. She said, he may be the head, but I'm the neck. Meaning I can turn his head whichever way I want to. And here Rachel is doing this very thing. She hears Jacob's hating Esau's hating Jacob, going to kill him. And so she warns Jacob, and then she goes and tells her husband, "Oh, honey, I don't want Jacob to marry any of these Canaanite girls here. I want him to have a child, a wife from our people." Now they had come, you remember, from back in the land of where his people were, and so father says, "Okay, that sounds good. We'll send him away and get him a wife." So off he goes, bye bye, and there he goes, and Rachel thinks, "Oh my goodness, I saved Jacob from being killed by Esau." Now, look at how she was so um, she was cared more about Jacob than she did Esau's, and he cared more about Esau than he did Jacob. Wow, this attitude was passed down. So they go. Here he goes off to live with Laban, which is Rebekah's brother. Now Laban has a big place over there. He's done well. Remember in the time that it was back then, that if you had a daughter, they were not going to help you. They were going to get married and go live with their husband and help that person. So you wanted to have sons so that sons would live around you and help you in more productivity. You become, and you would be wealthy and quite a big person. So he goes over to live with Laban, and he tells Laban, "I've got to be here because my brother Esau is going to kill me, and I need to do this." And so Laban says, "Okay, I'll tell you what you can do. You can handle my animals. You're pretty good at that, and then I'll help you. I'll keep you for my sister's sake." Well, Jacob's standing, he sees this beautiful woman named Rachel, and Rachel is just a drop dead gorgeous babe. And he says, "Man," he says, I really want that woman right there." And Laban says to him, "Oh, look, she's valuable. What are you going to give me for her?" That one time, this is what they did. They would give something great to the father, and it was like they're not buying, but they're showing how precious this woman is to them, and that they were capable of providing for that woman. So the father said, "Well, what you need to do is work for me. And if you'll work for me," and they settled on 7 years. "If you work for me 7 years, I'll give you Rachel. Boy, you're going to be happy with her. She is a fine looking woman, and she's going to make you happy." And the whole time he was working, man, he was just as happy as he could be. Everything he was doing, he knew he could do so that he could be married to Rachel. She was just a beauty. So they were betrothed, in effect. And, they were um, fiancés, and they were going to be married. So he wasn't worried about it, and he knew he had this future, and so he was working hard for Laban. Now, Laban had two daughters, and she had Leah, and he had Leah, and he had Rachel. Now, Leah was older. So what happens is he's sitting there talking to Rachel, and he says, "Hey, Rachel, this is the day, man, we get to get married. We get to be together. We're going to have a great time. And I've worked so hard for you." And she says, "I'm so proud of you. You did so well." And so they go to get married. And you know how this is. You've seen weddings today, and they've got the veil. Well, back then, in fact, it was very interesting. If you look at Chuvash, where my wife is from in Russia, they have not a veil. They have like a tablecloth almost that's over her, and she can't see, and she can only lift up the corners to see where she walks. And so the husband, or to be the groom, can't know who she is under that veil. Well, they get married. He spends his wedding night with her. It's dark. People are around. They go into their tent. And people are around outside partying and having fun and everything. And the sun comes up the next morning. He sees this is not Rachel. This is Leah, her sister. Oh man, he's upset. I have waited for her, and you've given me Leah. Oh man, he's so mad. He goes to Laban. What are you doing? You gave me Leah, not Rachel. Now, the Bible says Leah had soft eyes. I don't know what that means, but no matter what, for Jacob, Rachel was appealing to him. Different people have different things that they find appealing, and you just can't know from one man or woman to another. But for him, Rachel was appealing and Leah was not. He goes to Laban, what are you doing? Why did you make me marry Leah? And I even consummated it. And he says, you know the rule. The rule is that the older daughter gets married first. Man, he blew up. Now what am I supposed to do? What am I going to do now? He said, I tell you what you can do. I'll let you marry Leah also, Rebecca also, if you work for me another 7 years. This guy was a bigger trickster than Jacob. God had sent Jacob, who was tricking his way into the lineage, the blessing. He sent him to a bigger tricker than he was, and Laban made him marry Leah, and then he chose to marry Rachel. So here he is married to two sisters. Now this is important because and don't count Leah out. Don't say, oh man, Leah, that poor Leah, she never had Jacob's love. We're going to find out later that's not true. However, he dearly loved Rachel and probably spent most of his time with her. But barren. And what happened was that when he went to raise his family, he had 12 sons and at least one daughter. And let me read these for you. Jacob had 12 sons. Now listen, the sons of Leah, this is in chapter 35, verse 23. Jacob had 12 sons. The sons of Leah are Reuben, the firstborn of Jacob, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel are Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Rachel's maidservant Bilhah was Dan and Naphtali, and the sons of Leah's maidservant Zilpah were Gad and Asher. So he had all these sons through those four women. However, the sons he had with Rachel were most important to him because he too was prejudiced to certain children just like his parents were. And his parents were just like their parents were. Isn't that interesting? This thought process is being passed down. Could you imagine being there around? Of course, they didn't have Thanksgiving back then, but let's say a Thanksgiving day, and the meals that would have had to been prepared for 12 sons and at least one daughter, and all the food that had to be there, and the room they had to have inside to be able to eat it, and all that sort of stuff. How big their tents were, and it must have been quite an interesting time. Now, He had these 12 sons, and this became a nation later on. We're going to find this out. We're going to see this. So now keep in mind that Jacob had 12 sons, and they're going to have children. So you can see how this is going to build into a nation, because that is carrying the lineage of Abraham's, the covenant of Abraham, that the seed will come through him, and a great nation will come, and a great land. Now, he does very well financially working for Laban. In fact, what he did was Laban told him he could take with him all the striped animals that he had. And so he put up these bars of color, and when the animals went in or when the animals went out, they passed these bars. And this is exactly what we were talking about last Sunday morning, when we were talking about why God puts an elder up there for us to see as an example as we're following Christ, because what you dwell on, you move toward. And sure enough, all Laban's animals started becoming striped, and God just blessed him with a whole bunch of striped animals. And when he left Laban, he had a ton of wealth, in effect, in all of these animals that he was allowed to carry with him, take with him. Now there's stories about that. This really goes into a lot. We just don't have a whole heap of time to be able to do every single bit of Jacob. Jacob is very much looked at, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, because this is the beginning of the nation. And this is the beginning of how the nation came to be, with God's blessing on it. And so God spends a lot of time on this all the way through the book of Genesis, and he doesn't begin until he gets to Moses on Exodus, and that's when the nation is already, they've been there 400 years, and they're probably 1,000,000 plus strong. So now you don't have just one person leading, like here Jacob, or like Isaac, or like Abraham, but now you've got a nation. You've got to deal with it differently, and God does. So he leaves Laban, and he's decided he's going to go from there where the Hebrews were from, and he's going to go back to Canaan where his father was. And because he's going to go back, he's really afraid. He knows good and well Esau wants to kill him, but he knows that land there is for him. He has the blessing. He's supposed to be in that land. So he goes back, and when he does this, he's really worried about what his brother's going to think of him. So he takes and he sends all of his children, all of his wives, all of his animals, all of his wealth before him, and then he waits and walks in there alone. He's doing this as and saying, "Here I am. If you want to take vengeance on the things that I love the most." And so I'm opening myself to you. Well, when he goes back, like I said, he's very nervous. So at night, one night, he's laying there trying to sleep, and the angel of the Lord comes for him, and he wrestles with him. And he wrestles with him and wrestles with him, and he won't stop. He says, "I won't stop until you bless me." And so he blesses him. At first, he cripples him by touching him in the hollow of his thigh, so he knocked it off. And I don't know what that means, but he made him give him a limp. Whether it was permanent or not, I don't know. But he blesses him, and then he changes his name. No longer, he said, are you going to be called Jacob. It would be like saying, no longer are you going to be am I going to call you a trickster? But now I'm going to name you Israel, which is a name of the future, a name that becomes a nation. All Israelites point back to Abraham, but all of them call themselves by Jacob's new name, Israel. Now you've changed. Now you care about God. Now you know who you're supposed to be. Now you are Israel. And so all the children who used to be the children of Jacob are now called of Israel. So he's living up there in Ur, and he knows he's got to leave, or that area, and he knows he's got to leave, and he's going back to see Esau. So he's moved back to Canaan now. And Esau, when he sees him, by the way, says, all right, no big deal. I've forgotten about that a long time ago. Look at me. I've been blessed. God's blessed me. I have everything I need. I don't need your stuff. You keep it. And thank you very much. Come on, let's go have a meal together. Then Jacob goes back to, we're going to talk about Jacob going to Egypt now. And in this particular time, God brings a famine on Egypt. Now, here's what I'm talking about, these stories being intertwined, because Jacob has children. The firstborn of Rachel was Joseph, and he was so proud of Joseph and this woman that he loved, Rachel, that he made for Joseph a fancy coat, some kind of coat of many colors. And that was a big deal because they didn't have manufacturing like they do today. They hadn't have bright colors and all that sort of stuff. But when they had a coat of many colors, he's putting all the colors and beauty and sunshine that you could find into something for his son to wear. And remember, what you wore tied you into your family, told your family who you were. So they had this famine, and at this time, just before it, the other brothers got sick and tired of Joseph and sold him off into slavery. We'll talk about that next. But sold him off into slavery, and he went to Egypt, and he went there and he told the Pharaoh there, look, he um, deciphered this dream for him, and he told him that you're going to have a famine, put stuff away. So they had a famine, and what happened was then the children went down there to get food, and there's this story we'll talk about next week, and it caused Jacob, now known as Israel, to go down there and see his son Joseph, and everybody was reunited in Egypt. Now, this is important. This is important because God is showing us how Christ is going to deliver us from sin. Here, the family goes to Egypt, and when they do, when Jacob gets there, remember the Bible calls him Jacob, not Israel, because Israel really and truly is going to be this group of people, and from then on to be known as this nation. This is the nation promised to Abraham. Remember in the covenant. So Jacob goes to Pharaoh, and he thanks him for the food they got. He blesses Pharaoh. So what do you know about Pharaoh? Remember, Pharaoh listened to Joseph and put him second in command. And so this Pharaoh knows God and cares about God. When Moses comes around, that Pharaoh does not know God. So Jacob also blesses his sons, and he dies, and he is buried there he is left there in Goshen, in that land, and then carried back to Canaan later on. So this is, by the way, remember I told you not to forget about Leah? When he goes back, his request was to be buried with Leah, not with Rachel. And he says, Leah, whom I love. So he had grown to love Leah. Rachel, by the way, died in childbirth with the second child, Benjamin. Now we're going to see this later on where Israel separates and two of his family stays in, two of the sons stay in the south and 10 of them go to the north. And we're going to see that Benjamin really was never a very big group of people. And obviously, for some reason, that came from him, Rachel, her dying in childbirth. Maybe this son was physically incapable, or maybe this is a design that God had. However, he loved Joseph, and that's where we're going to go next. But look at how the attitudes of the fathers are being passed down for generations and generations, which is like quite interesting. I hope you enjoyed this. Now stick with us because next week we're going to take this even further until we get into the nation of Israel. Thank you.